have to give me the ability to share the screen.
Yes. You can.
Yeah.
Yes. I have to make you the co-host. Yes.
I think you do, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's working. Thank you. Okay,
So we
suddenly
are
more
live.
people have come. Yeah.
We're live now, and I think we can start if our moderator is ready. Dr. Mary,
Where is Mary?
she was here. I think she got disconnected, so let me give her a call.
There seem to be some people in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Maybe I can let them in. Oh, no. Now that I'm a co-host. I can see that there must be some people from Rabha community, from Garo community.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Let me see.
And of course Thai community, sir. Thai.
Yes, so who is from Thai?
Thai.
I'm trying to see.
Ras Lakshmi Conver from Thai.
Oh,
community.
Konwar is there. Okay.
Yes,
Oh, yes, I see. Yes. And Gogoi is also there.
Yeah, Gogo is there.
Which is often Ahom.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very interesting and diverse group. So,
Okay, Dr. Mary can start the session.
Manali,
Yes.
our BC sir will join.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, BC sir will join auction. Yeah.
He
I
joined.
inform him. Yeah. I inform him. He has already joined or not? Not yet, I think so.
He's here, Professor.
He's here.
Yes, he's there.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. I'm here.
Hello,
Sir, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon.
Once again we meet.
Hello, sir.
Yes, again, Stephenberg. Hello.
And I will be saying some things which I said on that previous time, but in a different order. So
Don't worry. At this age, it is an advantage. You always forget half the things you listen to.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Dhiren sir, VC is here, so we can start.
Okay. We can start then.
Mary can start. Yes.
Yes, you can start now. Definitely.
Okay.
Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. You can start. Good afternoon to everybody.
Yes, sir.
So a very good afternoon, everyone. It's nice. Many people have joined. Let us begin the session. Welcome to this 3-day international webinar on Indian languages organized by the Department of Linguistics, Assam University, in collaboration with Tibeto-Burman Linguistics Association of Northeast India, Tiplane. Today is the inaugural day, and we are very happy to have with us our Vice Chancellor, sir. In spite of his very busy schedule, he has managed to join our inaugural session. I would like to first of all express our gratitude and thanks to him. We have all the speakers already. So let me highlight today's program. First, we have the welcome address and concept note by Professor K. Dhiren Sinha. Then we have the inaugural address by our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dilip Kumar Nath. Then we have the address by the head of the department, Professor S. Ganesh Bhaskaran. Then we have the first talk for the day, which will be delivered by Dr. Stephen Moray. And we have the next talk by Professor Avadis Kumar Mishra. Then last, we have the word of thanks from Monali Longmai Dai. To begin the session, may I now invite Professor K.H. Dhiren Sinha to give the welcome address and the concept note. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mary Kim. Good afternoon, everyone. So as we know that India is a multilingual, multi-ethnic, and multicultural country. So India is the home of the 6 language family, namely Indo-Aryan, Tibeto-Burman, Austroasiatic, Tai-Kadai, Dravidian, and Andamanese, with more than 120 languages as per 2001 Census of India. Besides, India is well known for its linguistic diversity in the subcontinent, and Indian languages have shared linguistic features, which includes lithophonetic sounds, S-OV word order, absence of prepositions, morphological reduplication, echo formation, reduplicated verbal adverbs, explicator compound verbs, use of converbs, oblique marked subjects, morphological causatives, and so on. In the view of the above, the Department of Linguistics, Assam University, Silchar, is organizing 3-day international webinar on Indian languages in collaboration with Tibeto-Burman Linguistic Association of Northeast India on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of March 2021. In this regard, I take the opportunity to welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor Dilip Chandra Nath, eminent educationist, and our Dean Madam, Professor Bala Das, and our HOD, Professor Ganesh Bhaskaran, and our 6 speakers, Professor Stephen Moray, University of Latrobe, Australia, Professor Avadis Kumar Mishra, IFLU, Shillong, India, Professor David A. Patterson, Dartmouth College, USA, and Professor Alexander Kopf, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and Professor Shobhana Chalia, University of North Texas, USA, and Professor Kavita Rastogi, University of Lucknow, India, and my dear colleagues, research scholars, and members of our Tibanai. So I wish you have a very wonderful webinar. And with these few words, I can put my welcome address. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor K.H. Dhiren Sinha for the welcome address and the concept note. Now, may I now invite our Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor Dilip Chandra Nath, for the inaugural address. Over to you, sir.
Namaskar. Good afternoon to everybody. I am very happy that the Department of Linguistics of Assam University, in collaboration of Tibeto-Burman Linguistic Association of Northeast India, is organizing this very important webinar of Indian languages, especially in the light of our new education policy 2020. This is a country of 140 crores of multilingual country, and specifically in northeastern region, we speak in so many different languages and dialects. Many languages are not known to the outside world. Many small group. Basically, we have 22 official languages, but others are little recognized and non-recognized. So that is our problem, basically, understand. If we see the UNESCO report, the many languages, we know that a kind of recognized languages are in the vulnerable group or in endangered group. Even Dimasa is a vulnerable group. Deuri is a language which is very endangered language. So there are many small languages, our languages, Adi languages, even Vishnupriya Manipuri languages. Even a large number of people speak, and each speaking group has a different culture. Now, how to protect them? I think these issues should be discussed. And the new education policy is a India-centric. What is India-centric? The language comes in the first front. The education should be in the mother tongue, mother language. Of course, when we see that we still cannot go beyond 22 official languages, even these 22 official languages, can we teach them? But we have to have. So in that direction also we have to work. When our beloved Prime Minister announced that, in Assam itself, that medical college will be in the, local language, the Assamese language, engineering college, Assamese language. So this body can, try to make the language simpler even, and the, students friendly also. Now we are very much accustomed to the English language. Like me also, even if you give to speak in my mother tongue, possibly I cannot speak, beyond 10 minutes. I have to stop. Though I know, local language, Assamese, Bengali, Hindi, but we are so much accustomed to English. We can speak in English little bit. I cannot claim. So these language experts are here. I understand very renowned people like Professor Stephen Moray, Professor Adesh Mishra, and many others who will be talking it, and then the faculty members who are attending this, they can through participation, they can give suggestions. Basically, my concern is to issue how to protect this small language group and how to bring to in the literature form. See, Karbi language, they don't have a basically written form. They are still not existing in a right way. Though my university, we have started a kind of certificate course, but we have to develop the grammar, we have developed the the how to read, what to read, all these things. So small group, they should be encouraged to protect their language, and this is the important forum. They can come out with the suggestions how to do that. And the university has role, all the education has a role. They have to. We have we in this university has a small center, but the teachers are the main leaders. They should do it. Like Department of Linguistics, even Department of Bengali, there is a center to protect endangered language group. But when teacher works, and it is actually proceeds. So this forum can speak on that, and also how to develop the teaching materials in different language groups. That is also very important if we want to follow with the our new education policy 2020, who is stressing so much on the learning in the mother tongue, and also the mother language Sanskrit. That is stressing on the learning Sanskrit, because if we say the Sanskrit is the mother of all languages, when United States of America, they are focusing on the Sanskrit. The NASA itself, there's a cell to learn Sanskrit. So Sanskrit has the better capability of learning and giving the direction to other language, basically, when most of the languages are derived from that language. So these are few issues I think you will be discussing. Other than any issues you know better, you are the specialist of the subject, the language, but such seminars should be, should be done in others also, but especially on these three issues, maybe that. With this, I think this is inaugurated, this program is inaugurated, and I wish that this will be a very successful one. And if possible, I request the organizer, to have documentation and bring out a small proceedings after peer reviewing. Otherwise, you convene the seminar and you'll forget after a few months. But if you have a proceedings, definitely it will be remembered by everybody and the generation to come and students will. So with this, I conclude my small inauguration speech. I again wish you all the success to make it a most fruitful in achieving the new education policy goal. Namaskar. Thank you all. Yes, moderator, Hauke, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, Professor Dilip Chandranan, our Vice Chancellor, for inviting the 3-day webinar and also for setting the tone of the webinar. We also thank him for his time and for his suggestion. And sir, as you have said, yes, we will come up with the proceedings of the webinar. Thank you very much, sir. We shall now proceed to the next item, that is addressed by the head of the department, Professor S. Ganesh Bhaskaran. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to everyone. I feel it is a pleasant opportunity to have a talk with you, all of you. We have a nice time to listen from our Honorable Vice Chancellor. And rightly he has pointed out, we have to have our education system should have been through the mother tongue, and we should also try to make the teaching materials from the reasonable mother tongues. And I wanted to take this opportunity to say something about our department. Our department came into existence during 1995 with the aim of developing a better understanding of the language studies in the Northeastern region particularly. Based on that, our department is giving much importance to study and document the minor and endangered languages of this region. Professor Dhiren Singh also have expressed many of his views regarding the spread of the languages in Northeastern all over the India also. So Northeastern India is having many more languages, which are mainly noticed by the scholars. So our department is also working on. We are trying to do research on these endangered languages as well as the minor and minority languages also. So I wanted to have only this much of information to share with you. I welcome all other professors who are going to give the address, and I'm very happy to be here to listen from them. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, our head of the department, Professor Ganesh Bhaskaran, for the welcome address. Now we come to the important part of today's program, that is the first talk of the day by Dr. Stephen Morey. Before I give him his time, let me take the pleasure of introducing our first speaker. Professor Stephen Morey, as many of you may know him or may not know him, it is difficult to introduce a person like him because He is a widely known person already. Professor More is at present teaching in the Department of Languages and Linguistics, La Trobe University, Melbourne, Australia. He worked for his PhD in he was awarded his PhD on the topic The Thai Languages of Assam, a Grammar and Text by Monash University. And from then he has always been working extensively in the Thai languages of the northeastern part of the languages of the northeast. He has received many grants, awards. He has published extensively. He is a well-known community linguist working for the preservation and documentation of endangered languages with the community. His recent works, some of his recent professional experiences are he's working member of the Kurnai on language reclamation, access to language sources in the indigenous of Gippsland. He is also working extensively in the preservation and documentation of Thai languages of Assam and also Naga languages. It is difficult to give an elaborate introduction of a person like Professor Stephen More. So I will not take much time to introduce him. We would like to hear him more. So without much further ado, I would like to invite him. And today he is going to talk on the linguistic diversity of the Indo-Myanmar border region and documenting it for future generation. The topic itself is so interesting. I'm sure of us are looking forward to listening to him. Therefore, I will not take any more time and I will hand over the time to our speaker. We will have a 40-minute talk and after 20-minute discussion. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. So I think the first thing I should try to do is to share my screen, and I do want to, oops, that's not what you want to see. That's better. I do want to apologize to anybody who has listened to some of the talks I've been giving in Northeast in the last few weeks, because some of the material that you will see here I have talked about before, but most probably there are people here attending that I haven't had a chance to talk to, so I still want to say these things again. Oops. But what I wanted to start today by an overview of the situation in the Northeast. So there's a wonderful book by Professor Nick Evans, who has studied Indigenous tribal languages here in Australia and who has also studied languages in Papua New Guinea, which is called Dying Words. And if you can get a hold of this book, I think it's a great example of what is possible and what is so diverse and interesting about the various languages of the world. And he has a list in that book of countries according to their language diversity. And India is listed as number 4 after Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, and Nigeria. But India is a vast country and the linguistic diversity is not the same in all parts of India. And I think we know that the Northeast, with perhaps 3% of the population, has got perhaps a quarter or a third or maybe more of the languages, not to mention all the major religions. So how do we count the number of languages? Now, I think it was the Vice-Chancellor who mentioned the Indian census in your introduction, and my apologies if it wasn't, but that's somebody did. And the Indian census will probably give a different number of languages from a source like the Ethnologue, which will be known to some of you. And the reason for this is that it's actually very difficult to count the number of languages that there are. it depends on how you define language, and we could give a whole talk about that. And it also depends on having the information, because there are still parts, particularly the India-Myanmar border area, where we still don't really know the whole story. And I know that there are speakers of many of those languages here present tonight. But I think we can say without doubt that the northeast of India is the most linguistically diverse part of the country, with all those language families represented. So many of you, but before I talk about that, I just want to remind everybody what this concept of language families is about. So we talk about there being at least 5 language families represented in the Northeast, because there are speakers of some Dravidian languages living in the Northeast that have come there in more recent times, and there certainly are Thai speakers and Tibeto-Burman, Indo-European and Austroasiatic. But what do we mean by language families? And I think it's worth reminding ourselves that language families are a construct of linguistic theory based on the regular correspondences or patterns when we compare words across a wide range of languages. And if we look at the words in English, Gothic, which is the ancestral language of German, Latin, the language of the Roman Empire and the ancestor of French and Spanish and Italian and others, Sanskrit, which you know more about than I do, but if you like, the ancestral language of many languages of northern India, including, of course, Assamese and Bangla, Ahumya and Bangla, and finally Iranian, language of the Persian Empire, and into the present day, you can see the related words for these kinship terms, the words for mother and father, brother, sister, and so on. You can see the similarities between them. This kind of similarity cannot arise by accident. It indicates that all of these languages had once a common ancestor, which we now call Proto-Indo-European. There is argumentation about when and where this language was spoken, and I don't intend to discuss that today because I don't really have a strong view on it. But the fact that in the English words mother, father, and brother, the middle consonant, written with th but pronounced the, corresponds to a t sound, a t sound in both Latin and Sanskrit, cannot be an accident of history. This indicates relationships between languages. But here in the, when I say here, I am feeling myself to be in the Northeast today, even though I'm actually sitting in my living room in Melbourne, Australia. But I will say here anyway. Here in the Northeast, there are so many different language families, and in some cases, in one village, you will have multiple language families, and I will talk about that a little later. But I also want to make the point, and I think it's an important one, that the history of languages and the history of the ethnic history of communities or their genealogical history is not the same thing. So it may be that the history of an individual population does not match the history of the language they speak. And the example that I want to talk about today are the Morans of Tinsukia district, who now speak Assamese. But in earlier time, they spoke their own Moran language, which is a Boro-Garo language, documented in just one small article from 1904, as far as I know. I have not gone any further in the research of that, but that's as far as I know. So the history of their language is the history of the Boro-Garo languages. It is related to Dimasa, it is related to Diori, it is related to Boro and Garo. But that's the history of the language they used to speak, and that's the history of their ethnic group, if you like, is related to that. But the history of the language they speak today is the history of Assamese. So thus you can have one ethnic history and a language with a different history. This is a complex point, which is, I think, and can be difficult to understand. I hope you can all see this map. This is from the Ethnologue, which is a map of the linguistic diversity of Northeast India, and each one of these numbers represents a language in Ethnologue's analysis, and the different colours represent the different language families. But it's more complicated than that. I don't know if you can see the big green arrow on the right-hand side that is pointing to number 194, but that refers to the Tangsa, or Naga Tasse, as it is called in Ethnologue, and we know that Tangsa is very diverse. And I'll show you some of that diversity a bit later. So it really isn't one language, because we know that different groups of people within Tangsa can't understand each other. And if they can't understand each other, then how can it be one language? So this is already, there's probably a lot more languages than are shown by the numbers on that map. But we don't really know how many. The issue of what languages are called is important, and as many of you will know, the people formerly called Lushai are now called Mizos. The Mikir have become Karbi. So this was written by the late Robin Sperling, someone that Monali, I know, will remember very fondly. A great researcher in our field, a foundational researcher who passed away this year at the age of 94 in January, just a couple of months back, after a lifetime of excellent linguistic and anthropological research. But he made the point in his 2003 article that even the names that we give to languages and the names that people themselves give to their languages is firstly not a fixed thing, it can change over time, and it is itself a complicated thing. The whole question of the term Naga I could discuss in more detail. I probably won't here, but let's say that some of the languages which are spoken by Naga people are more similar to Boro and Dimasa and indeed Moran that we were speaking before than they are to the other Naga languages. So Naga isn't a linguistic grouping, and this again, it's important to distinguish between linguistic and ethnic groupings. So I put in a slide from Gurdon's 1904 article on the Morans. Now, this is all of the words that Gurdon recorded having the being translation of English words which start with the letter A. So imagine for a moment that this is the language of your ancestors and you would like to recover it. Have a think about essential words whose English meaning begins with the letter A that are not present in this list. So just have a look at that list for a moment and think about it. Because of the Zoom situation that we are facing here, it's not so easy to get some answers. But I was thinking, suppose I was a member of the Moran community and I was trying to recover my language, what would be missing? So first of all, there's no word for aunt. Now, aunt is already a complex term because in English, aunt or auntie means the sister of your father, whether younger or older, and also the sister of your mother, whether younger or older. And that's a very unsophisticated way of talking about that relationship. And we also use the word aunt traditionally in my society to refer to female friends of your parents who are of their generation. Now, you know from all the languages that you speak that in most of the cases of the languages that you speak, there's a different word for the sister of your father and the sister of your mother. In some languages, there's a different word for the younger sister of your mother from the older sister of your mother, and a different word from the younger sister of your father and the older sister of your father. And in some languages, there's a different word depending on whether a man or a woman is speaking. But in English, we have only aunt. But in the Moran language, we don't have anything. So that's one essential word we don't have. A second essential word that I thought a language would need is answer. You have ask, but you don't have answer. And a third essential word I thought, well, angry is actually there. I don't know why I put that, because angry is there. But you can immediately see how lacking in detail this list of words from Moran language is. It's still better than having nothing, but it's not enough. So what do we need to do in order to avoid other languages being in the situation of Moran? We need to understand how language works, and we need to record it. Now, understanding how language works includes understanding that the difference between languages is not just about the words, and the words are different, but it's also about the structure of the languages. And I think you can just read that slide while you're thinking about this idea of the Indosphere and the Sinosphere, meaning influenced by India and influenced by China in a very broad sense. But we can give an example of a Sinosphere type language, which is Diahom, which is an isolating language. Every meaningful element is a separate word. It's largely a monosyllabic language, which means that most words are a single syllable, and they would have had tones, but we don't know what the tones of Ahom are. So if you want to say, I will go, Gaudaka, 3 separate words, 3 separate meaningful elements. In the Indosphere, on the other hand, you're much more likely to have agglutinating or fusional profile. So you join bits together to make a word. So you have something like Assamese jam, I will go, which combines the I and the will into a single element, this at the end of the word, as in come, I will eat, jam, I will go. But you cannot separate which is the bit that means will and which is the bit that means I. Actually, Assamese is special because zam can also mean we will go. And that's a special feature of Assamese. Assamese also has lots of multisyllabic words like pani, water, which can't be divided into ba and ni. If this was a Thai word, ba would mean something and ni would mean something, but it doesn't. Okay, so bearing that in mind. So here's another map of linguistic diversity, which is the linguistic diversity of the Naga languages. I won't say much more about that because, well, I think there are some speakers of Naga languages possibly here. The important thing, though, in this map is that the top right-hand corner, the ones shown in orange and in the sort of darker red-pink color, the Kemnyan and the Konyak, what are listed here as Konyak groups, the languages including Tangsa, Nokte, Wancho, etc. These belong to a particular group of languages. They are more similar to Boro and Singpo than they are similar to all the other Naga languages shown in the other colors, yellow, green, and so on at the bottom part. So although Naga is a cultural group, it is not a linguistic group. And this distinction we have to talk about. And then we have the issue of the border, because the border runs through the middle of these Naga groups, particularly the northern Naga groups. And I ask my friends from those communities, what does the border mean? And they say, well, we believe we should be able to move freely within our traditional lands. Basically, if you go back to that map, we should be able to go anywhere in that area. It's not particularly a good idea right at the moment with the situation in Myanmar as it is, but this is what's still happening to some extent on that border. But it has become a big split. So, for example, the Lochang people, and I'm talking to some Lochang colleagues at the moment, discussing with them, who are on the Myanmar side, on the Burma side, discussing with them the orthography for their language. They've got a Roman-based orthography that they are producing. And we want to introduce this to the Lochang people on the Indian side. But we want to make sure that before we start introducing it, that there is agreement between the Lochang speakers on the Burma side about the best way to write the language. It's complicated because these people have never met each other, even though they speak the same language, and there's very few people speaking Lochang. Maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500 on both sides of the border. Roughly 50-50 split. And apologies for those who've seen this photo before, but here the old man in the white hair, He's a speaker of Maitai variety of Tangsa. He is watching, he's on the Burma side, and I'm there with him on the Burma side. And he is watching a recording that I made of someone speaking Maitai on the India side. It's the same history, it's the same story, it's the same language, but they can't get to meet each other. That's just a photo of people talking by modern means, which is the Messenger on Facebook. So I wanted to say, and again, apologies for those who've heard this before, because some of you have, but what does linguistic diversity look like in India? So I'll move through this a little quicker because there's other things I want to go to later. But the case of Balipotar, which was a village that I spent quite a lot of time in between, let's say, 2003 and about 2008. And some of you know Bihung Brahma, who came up and joined me there for a field season for a week or so at one of those times. I think it was the first time he'd been in field work outside of his own Boro community. We had a lovely time there. It's an area on the plains beside the Donghiri River, which is to the right on this map. And this is basically a photograph of this village. It's a relatively small place, having essentially two roads, one that's running across the plan, and then there's one that goes down from the middle there. But within this community, and here's a few photos, some of the elder people, some of whom have passed away, and the rice fields of northeast India. I mean, how beautiful are they, especially when they are so green. And that's a photo of the Buddhist temple there. But what I really wanted to talk about is the languages that are spoken there. So you have 6 different communities there, all speaking different languages from 4 different language families. Now, I know Tayaiton, so I can speak that, and I also know the Drung variety of Jingpo, so I can speak with those people directly in their own languages. But often the Thai and the Drung are intermarried with each other, but their languages are completely different. They're from different language families, except that a lot of Thai influence has occurred on Drung. But there are 2 other Tibeto-Burman languages there, Tamang, which is more similar to Tibetan, and I apologize here because, well, this is not my doing, but the term Bodic, B-O-D-I-C, means that the language is related to Tibetan because Bod, B-O-D, is the Tibetan spelling, is a transliteration into Roman of the Tibetan spelling of their name, which in Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, is now pronounced something like Pu, because the language has changed over time, but the writing has not. But Bodic doesn't mean anything to do with Bodo, the language that we know from northeast India, which is very much different from Bodic. So this is a complexity, and this is something which people who don't know the history of the way that language families are named and subfamilies are named in linguistics would get confused by. But the Garo language is different again. It's related, it's more closely related to Jingpo than anything else on that list, but still quite unintelligible. And then the Munda and Oraon are from different language families, and there are people from the tea labouring communities belonging to those groups there, but I didn't have a chance to find out more and the extent to which their languages are still in use. But it's not just those 6 community languages. It's also Sadri, the Hindi-based Creole, used by many of the tea garden labourers and used by the people who employ them to talk with them. It's Assamese, the state language and language of education, and the official languages, Karbi, the official language of the autonomous region. There are no Karbis living in the village, but it's still the official language of the autonomous region. It's Assamese, the official language of the state. There's Hindi, the national language, and of course English, a national language. So there's, I think that makes 11 different languages in use in that area, and nobody speaks all of them. And there is no one language probably that everybody speaks, possibly with the exception in that village of Assamese. So if you did have mother tongue education in that village, even if you were deciding to have mother tongue education in the 6 community languages, you first got to produce materials in 6 languages. And in the case of Thai Aiton, that means producing materials in the Aiton writing, the Thai writing. So that's a challenge. But these are very small numbers of people. So suppose the Karbi Anglong district decides to bring in mother tongue education. Well, there'd be some pressure to make it Karbi, but that's not the mother tongue of this village. 'Tis the mother tongue of most of Karbi Anglong, but not here. So while mother tongue education is a very important thing, it is also not all that easy. The other thing that I need to mention here is that the multilingualism in this area also involves different scripts. The Thai language have their own scripts. The Tibetan script is used by the Tamang people in their community temple, Assamese and Roman. And if you go to the railway station, you'll see the Nagari script for the Hindi signs at the station at Naljan, which is just across the river. But and possibly there are now increasing number of Hindi signs inside Balipotar as well, but not when I was there. And multiple ways of writing different languages in the Roman script, such as this example of Karbi. So with that level of linguistic diversity, what do people do? Well, nowadays what people do is they adopt some kind of common language, or in some cases a lingua franca. I didn't put a slide in for this, but I know of a hill area in northeast, near Toledo, where there are 3 villages. One is a speaker of the Hacheng variety of Tangsa. One, they are speakers of the Champang variety, and in one they are speakers of the Hakun variety. These 3 are all listed under Tangsa, but they are really not mutually intelligible. But for some reason, the Hacheng variety has become the lingua franca of that hill, just of those 3 villages. But it's only in those 3 villages where Hacheng is the language of wider communication. As soon as the people come down from the hill, which is about half an hour's walk down to Lido town, there they will have to speak Assamese. So, but for those communities, Hacheng on the hill and Assamese down at its foot are languages of wider communication. But there's an older and in some ways more interesting and in some ways more demanding to research tradition of communication, which is called now lingua receptiva or receptiva, depending on how you want to pronounce Latin. And this is what happens in the Tangsa community in the old days when someone, for example, from the Joglai Tangsa meets a speaker of the Lochang, and that's what this photo shows. So the old man on the right, who has now passed away, that's the Takna Gaumbura, he spoke Joglai. And the old man in the middle, Shehu, as far as I know is still living, he spoke Lochang or Langching. Now, to give you an idea of how different the varieties are, you'll see later, I think, a language example from the 2 of them. But they speak to each other in their own mother language, and they understand each other. They understand each other because they've been listening to each other's mother languages for many years. But the young men at the back, who you can see in the photograph, they couldn't understand. They are relatives of the Takna Gaumbura, the one on the right, so they understand him okay, but they couldn't understand when the other old man spoke. And that's because the younger generation isn't learning this skill of being able to understand the varieties of the other different groups around them. So the lingua receptiva system is falling down, and as it does, it makes it harder for the people to communicate with each other, and they switch to Assamese. Okay, so in terms of language vitality then, another really important issue here is that the vitality of different languages in Northeast India varies. So at the one end you have something like Tayahom, which hasn't been spoken as a mother tongue, that's the language you learn from your mother and speak in the house, for a long time. It is still used in religious situations and it is undergoing some kind of revival, but it is not exactly a mother tongue language. Or you have a situation like Tai Kam Yang, which is only spoken by people of the oldest generation. There is a little revival of interest in it, but it is not really being learned by children. And in many smaller languages, you're seeing a shift to Assamese, Hindi, or English. And one of the reasons for this is to do with education. So it's one thing, of course, for children to go to school and learn in the state language in Assamese, or if they go to an English school in English, or if they go to a Hindi school in Hindi. That's fine. But often children go to residential schools. I'm sure many of you have this experience of going to residential schools, and I'm afraid I hear that it is still the case that teachers are punishing children for speaking their own language in the playground and in their own time. Now, it's okay, of course, to say to children you have to speak the language of the classroom in the classroom. If the class is being conducted in Assamese, you have to speak Assamese because everybody needs to understand you. But when children are in their free time, we should not be discouraging them from speaking their own language. Because if we do, these mother tongues can't survive. And if the children are away from home for most of the time between the age of 5 and when they go to university, then when are they going to learn the traditional stories and the songs and all the traditional knowledge of their community about, medicinal plants and such things? When are they going to learn that? Because this is the time that they would hear the stories and learn these things. And nowadays, so often people prefer to watch TV than they prefer to listen to their grandparents telling stories. So those are some of the challenges that we face. Now, I don't want to say too much about the Tangsa, but there are 80 named what we call sub-tribes. Each has its own language variety, and some of them, while very similar, some of them are very different. I wanted to jump, though, to some language examples. So these are 4 different languages translated the same sentence, I cannot carry them. Now, the first thing that we notice here is there is no word for them. It is not necessary in these languages to express the object if it is already known, and the them, which is all the people that have gathered on the top of a hill because of a great flood, the them is understood by the speakers. But you can also see from this that the languages have different words and indeed somewhat different grammatical structures. So, for example, the Joglai will say nga hulti mak, for I cannot carry them, and the Lochang will say ni hui tai mau. Now remember that Joglai and Lochang were the examples that those 2 old men were talking in the picture that I showed earlier. But you can hear the difference between nga hulti mak and ni hui tai mau. Now we can see that the words for I, first singular, nga and ni, are probably related. And they are. This is a regular pattern that an R vowel in Joglai is realized with an E in Lochang. That's a regular correspondence. But the words for carry, hul, and rui are less obviously similar, but they do go back to an original sort of underlying root form, which is probably more similar to the rira gun. So what happens is that that g changes to r in Lochang and un changes to ui, and g changes to h in Joglai and un changes to ul, so that hul and rui are cognates. But the words for able are not cognate at all, and the particles that mark the negative, though both having the initial M, are different because in the Lochang example, the first person and second person singular have merged, whereas in Joglai they haven't. So you can begin to understand when, if the Joglai say nga hulti mak and the Lochang say ni hui tai mau, I think actually my tones may not be right, why the young men of the Joglai are not understanding the Lochang very well. Now, if we have an average in India of somewhere between, somewhere less than 1,000 people per community of these mother tongues, what kind of mother tongue education can you set up? Not to mention the challenges of what writing you will use. Now, I'm not proposing to go through all this, but I've made a sort of discussion of all the different kinds of writings that have been suggested and have been used for these Tangsa languages. And I will just mention here that the Roman-based orthography's marking tone are getting some kind of usage by some communities, but some communities find the marking of, even though they recognize tone is present, they find the marking of tone challenging and difficult. But I will also mention that there has been some creation of new scripts, and on this slide here, you can see two different Roman orthographies for the same variety on either side, and the Tangsa script invented by the late Lakum Mosang in the middle. So even if you have made a decision, yes, and this is in the Mosang or Moshang as they call it, a variety of Tangsa. So even if you decide that you can set up a teaching program for Moshang in a village, which of the scripts will you use? This is not a straightforward question. Okay, so even before, though, we could begin to teach languages, we probably need to take some action to document them. So what has been my story? So October 17th, 1996, which is very rapidly coming up for 25 years, my first visit to Assam, firstly to look for Thai Ahom, but then I very quickly became interested in the Thai Pake and Thai Ai Tuan, and that was my PhD subject. Then I moved across to being interested in the Drung, and that led me to the Singpo. And then one day when I was in a Singpo village, I met some people from Tangsa who said they didn't speak their language anymore. They have shifted to Singpo, but they are still Tangsa, ethnically Tangsa, but the language they are speaking today now is Singpo. So the history of their language and the history of their ethnic community are two different things in their case. And then from learning Tangsa, I came into contact with the Wancho, so it keeps expanding. And I calculated that if I added together all the time that I've spent in villages over the last 25 years, probably adds up to more than 4 years, which is a very big part of the last 25 years. And I feel a little bit distant from it at the moment because I haven't been able to come in this last 1 year. And this is the longest period I've been away from India since 1996. But I'm unable to move at the moment, as you all know. So I probably spent that long time learning the languages, recording songs, stories, word lists, grammatical information, and then after making these recordings, making the metadata, transcribing and translating them, doing linguistic analysis, etc. You all know about these things, so I'll skip over a little bit this because I want to give an example of how the work might be done. So, and even those of you who've seen some of my lectures recently, you won't have seen this one because this is all new. Now I need to check that I have shared the sound. Yes. So first of all, I want to play part of a recording of the late Soipo Pansa singing a song, a traditional song of the Wancho. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. I think you will. Then, ready?
Apio nang mat kok sa sapa kai nong e cham phang nga sa kam da khu di nga nga he u e chu le hang lang dai u he nga kam khau tu hang dong dai nga he van e chak le hang sun dai bon he chi e yin le hang ma dai chi he.
Okay, so I'm assuming, I won't play the whole thing, beautiful though it is, I'm assuming there are no Wancho people in the audience right now, but earlier today I was giving a talk to a Wancho community workshop, an animation workshop, and played this recording, and it turned out, because Soipo Pansa died 1 or 2 years back, and it turned out that his daughter was in the audience and very pleased to see this video of her father, which she does not have a copy of. And this raises the point that returning these materials to the community is important. But we have this beautiful recording. There's a few issues with it. So it was recorded at the Kyati Hotel in Dibrugarh. Some of you will know this location. It's like every other hotel in India that I've ever visited, or almost every other hotel. There is building going on somewhere, and so you can hear the builders in the background. But the sound is still good. But simply having the recording isn't sufficient. So we need, in order to know what this recording is about for the future, we need to have what we call metadata. And although many of you have heard this all before, this remains one of the big challenges for linguistic documentation, that we don't spend enough time properly documenting the background to the recordings that we make and then archiving them. So what is metadata? It's the who. We know that. It's Soipo Pansa, the late Soipo Pansa. Where, I already told you, it's the Kyati Hotel. When, it was January of 2017, I think. Or it could have been 2017. How? What devices did we use for recording it? What was the camera? What was the microphone? But most importantly, what? So you could say many things about what. You could find out just the name of the song, and that's better than nothing. But you could also ask what style of song it is. And this is a children's song, a song to be sung to children. You could then transcribe the words sung in the language. That's going to be really helpful, because in the future, if Wancho songs cease to be sung, and that's happening in many places, even speakers of the language won't be quite sure what words are there. And then you might need a translation, but a translation is not by itself enough. We need word by word, or meaningful element by meaningful element. And finally, we need whatever the context is. Who can sing the song? Who composed it if it is known? Is it sung by anybody, or just by older people, or just by men, or just by women, or just in certain circumstances? And maybe there's a story associated with the song, and so on it can go. So what information did we collect? Well, first of all, Soipo had made his own book of songs, and he generously allowed me to photograph it. But as you can see, this photograph isn't taken very well. This is an exactly regular notebook, but the photo makes it look as if it's distorted in shape, and that's because of the angle of the photograph. So it'd be much better to scan it, but I didn't have a scanner with me. And notice the drawings at the bottom. These are some of the objects he refers to. He also writes it in a simplified Roman orthography. We can now write it in the Wancho script, which has been created. And this is a version where we now have the Wancho script at the top, a Roman orthography which represents the vowels and consonants but not the tones in the middle, and a translation at the bottom. And we see that for the first 3 lines. The Wancho script marks tone, and that's what those they're based on little feathers that are above the words indicating the different tones, or the lack of one indicating a tone. And this script was created by Banwang Losu, who is in Longding district. But even that's not really enough to understand how the language works, because here's the first sentence. And so I could ask you, so we have a translation of the whole thing, but I would ask you, which is the word for sickle? Is small sickle a single word or 2? How does the language convey the concept of please? And which is the word for me? Now, I don't think anyone in the audience today can answer those questions on the basis of the information that we have here. So a translation still isn't enough to really know what's going on. You're all linguists, you know this, but I thought I would put it in this way because it is an indication that we need a level of analysis beyond that. Now, many of you know something about, or know and are speakers of, Tibeto-Burman languages, so you already know that the verb will be at the end of the sentence. And you might be able to guess the word for sickle, but I want to give you the answer. So we did a word-by-word analysis of this, And from that, as you look at it there, you can see that the word for sickle is indeed represented by matkok. And that small sickle is two words. It's the word matkok combined with sa. Sa, I think actually, it's a mid-tone rather than a low tone. I don't speak Wamcho in any sort of meaningful way. Now, some of you will know from Sino-Tibetan languages, from Tibeto-Burman languages that you speak, that the word sa might be related to the word for child, and therefore is the bit that means small. And so, for example, in the Trung variety of Singpo, gasa means child. It's got a g in front of it, but that's another thing to explain. So this is a child sickle. Now, which bit conveys the meaning of please? It's the prefix s in front of the verb pa, which means to give. You never would have got that from the translation. And then finally, what's the word for me? Well, the answer is there isn't one. But the word at the end, kai, is an imperative marker, so it's a command, but it's a command that can only be uttered when the action that you want to have achieved is towards the speaker. So you only put kai at the end of after the verb when you want something done for me or for us. So sapakai means give it to me or give it to us. Give it towards the speaker. So there is no translation of me in this. It is done by the grammar, but you can't express that you can't make a direct translation of the Wamcho into English. And here's another reason why we need to do this work. So this is a manuscript written down in the 1850s probably of a song that was sung at a dance event. We call them here in Australia corroborees, by the tribal people, the Aboriginal people in Victoria, in Melbourne, where I live. And this was performed in 1843. The person who wrote it down carefully described the event where it was performed and talked about who was there, and we have the date. But we have no idea what this song means. And I promise you, I've done a lot of work on this, but we have no idea what this song means. And so, because he wrote down the words, of course, this was long before sound recordings were possible, but he did not give any information about the meaning. So we have it, but we can't understand it. So a method for recording the meanings of songs, and this is really something which is urgent now in Northeast India. Recording songs, do it. Every time an older person in any of the communities that you are involved in wants to sing a song for you, record them. But then make sure you write down who they are, when they sang it, and then find out what you can about it. Playing the song back to the singer straight away and then recording them explaining what it's about, you get more information than if you don't do that. Perhaps you can play it back in small sections, line by line, and ask them to explain the meaning of each line. They won't give you a word-by-word gloss the way that we did in the Wamcho, but you'll still get more explanation than you would if you don't do that. And in the talk that I was giving an hour or 2 hours now ago, they were realizing that in some areas of the Wamcho community, they have recorded songs that are in a archaic language that the people from the village, from some of the Wamcho villages, can't understand. So they need to go back and ask the singers what each bit means. And my inspiration to talk about this comes from a Facebook post that I saw a few days ago that reprinted this story. There's a Manipur tribe that has just one member left who knows its folk songs and musical instruments. Now, if that one person is not recorded soon, since no one lives forever and we cannot know how long people will live, that one can very quickly become zero. And that's when we have lost the tradition. So songs and stories are particularly important. Now, I've probably talked for too long. I was going to say a little bit about writing systems in the Northeast India. I will just show you a Thai Ahom manuscript. Some of you will have seen this, some of you haven't. One of the reasons why I like this slide is that the owner of the manuscript, the late Zunaram Sangbun Phukon, is shown at the top with his much loved bicycle. He was a great user of bicycle right up to the end. And in this photograph, he is looking back to his home village. And since he has now passed away, I really like that he is looking away from us, back to his home. It's a kind of metaphor for his situation. But this manuscript is also important because it was done by the Ahom priests in around 1795 as an attempt to record the meanings of the words in their language because they knew it was being forgotten. On the left-hand column, 4 lines down, we see Kai Jamba Kukurak. Kukurak means a chicken, Kai means a chicken, and Kai is indeed the Thai word for chicken. And this was their attempt to preserve what they could about their language. So this need to preserve language is not something new. That's 1795. It's a long time ago, right? People have been worried about this for a very long time. I won't go through all this stuff about the way in which the script was developed into Unicode, but I will just mention for those of you who are interested, who may be involved with languages that have scripts other than the Roman, that the process of getting things into Unicode and getting them usable on all our computer devices is not straightforward. It's not just getting them on the Unicode standard, it's making fonts, it's making keyboards, it's updating all the operating systems and machines so that they can use it. And right now, in PowerPoint, which is the program you're looking at, these Unicode fonts for Ahom and Wancho and the Thai languages do not work. So I'm in discussion, and this has been the case for months and months and months. I'm in discussion with people from Microsoft to get them to work, but there's something about the PowerPoint program that doesn't allow these particular fonts to work. So if you want to show them in PowerPoint, what you have to do is take a screenshot of something and import it in. So this is not, these words are not typed in, these words are not typed in these languages. I've actually had to make a photograph and put them there. If people are interested in this, I have made an online lecture of it. Look, I've probably spoken for enough, so I might unshare the screen. I think that's about the right length of time, isn't it? And, oh, there's a few questions that have come in the minutes since I have been talking. So there's one from Charengna. So what's the most important quality in documentation? What software have I used with documentation? So there's multiple answers to this. And one of the issues is that it's like, in terms of the quality of recordings, the recording that you can get from your mobile phone today, and apologies, those of you who can see me in my living room, while I've been speaking, the sun has set here. And because it was sunny and bright when I started talking, I have not got up and switched on my light. And so gradually in the next few minutes, I will get darker and darker, but I can't leave here and go and switch it on without leaving the talk. So you can see the darkness coming here because it's 15 minutes before 8 p.m. at night now here. It's become dinner time. So the quality of recording that you can get from your mobile phone is better than the quality of recording that we could get from the best recording devices 25 years ago. So it's better that you record something with your mobile phone, both video and audio, than that you don't record it at all. But when you do record it, if you record it on your mobile phone, you need to then take it off that phone, name that recording, and I haven't talked about naming recordings, but this is a substantial issue because if you're going to archive it, it has to have a permanent name. and also collect the background information, the metadata about the recording. And then I think the question is also bringing up the point about what are the priorities for recording. Now, if you think about everything that exists in English language, everything that has been spoken, recorded, written down, is present in movies and videos and radio and everything, all creates the documentation of English language. We can never imagine doing 1% of that, or indeed 1% of 1% of that for most of the languages of Northeast India. We can't do it. So we have to prioritize what is most important. And that really depends on what community members value and what you as a researcher want to talk about. I've spoken a lot about songs because I think songs are really important, but everyday conversation is important. Traditional stories are important. Procedural texts where people explain how you produce different kinds of foods are important. Personally, I'm more interested in songs than I am in food preparation. I'm going to have to go and prepare food myself shortly because my wife is away and I'm making my own dinner, and my own dinner is not quality, and I'm going to have to do it because I won't get to eat otherwise, and it is dinner time here. But since I'm less interested in food preparation than I am in traditional songs, I tend to record more songs than food preparation. But food preparation is equally important, interesting. It gives you information about different aspects of language. So, another question from Paul Tang has come about the experience of working from songs and raises the question of song language and spoken language. Now, this varies from one community to another. So, for example, amongst the Thai people, say the Thai Pake, whose songs I recorded first, I think that the words that appear in song language are all of them everyday words, although they might not be always common words, but they are there in the everyday language. On the other hand, amongst the Tangsa, there is a song language which is different from the everyday language. So, for example, amongst the Chamchang Tangsa, the word for sky is Ra, simply followed by A. But in song language, they will use the form Rang with a final Ang because that is the song language form. Now, it turns out that the song language is, well, certainly it's an archaic language, whether it is a sort of proto-form or not, but there is a regular pattern between words which seem likely to have had ang as their final in an earlier form of the language and a in the Chamchang variety. So, but when they sing in song language. When they speak in spoken language. But this will vary from one community to another. So the Wancho song I showed you before, sung by Soipo Pansa, was sung in pretty much everyday language of the village of Kamhua Noknu. But I learned 1 or 2 hours back, talking to some of those people, that in the nearby village of Ninu, they sing songs in a different language that the people in Kamhua Noknu do not commonly easily understand. They understand the spoken language of Ninu, but not the song language of Ninu. So the story of song language is complicated. Yes, I can put my email ID. Don't send me too many emails though, because it gets too much to answer them all. But of course, I'm happy to do whatever I can. So the email ID is there. We still have a little time, but maybe you'll give me just a moment to switch on the light, because it's now become almost completely dark here, since it is 12 minutes to 8 in the evening. I'll come back. This situation with the light is now much better. So, because Australia is currently 5.5 hours, well, where I live at Melbourne is currently 5.5 hours in front of Indian time. But, and this you won't know about, at the end of the summer, which is coming in just 2 weeks, our time will change and we'll only be 4.5 hours in front of Indian time. Because in India, you don't have this time changing. But the different states of Australia all have different times and it becomes complicated. So a question has come from Dhiren Singh about Turung. Is it a Thai or Singapore language? Okay, so I got into trouble last time I was in India for saying on radio that Turung is a Singapore language. But this is not really in doubt. It is a variety of Singapore language with a lot of Thai words in it. But ethnically, in terms of their many aspects of their culture and their ethnic history, if you like, their genealogical history, there is a lot of reason to say that the Turungs are of Thai. Now, they themselves argue about this. Oftentimes, Turung people that I know are the children and grandchildren of people from Thai or Singapore-speaking groups. There was one family I knew in the village of Ahomani, which is near to Hilonijan in Karbi Anglong. The grandmother, she was a Turung speaker of Singapore from another village, and the grandfather was a speaker of Thai. All the sons had grown up speaking Thai language because that was the language of their village, but they had all married Turung speakers who spoke Singapore, and all the grandchildren were multilingual. And there was a really interesting multilingual balance in that house. Then the grandmother died, and the Turung language, a Singapore language, started to be used less, and everyone switched over to speaking Thai all the time. And that's another situation that can occur. And so that is multilingual situation at the household level. So the answer to me would be Turung is definitely a Singapore language, but that doesn't say that the community are the same as Singapore. It doesn't mean that the Turung are not Thai people, because according to many of their histories, they switched from speaking Thai language to speaking Singapore language. It's like the Moran situation. The Morans speak Assamese, but they are a Borogaro community historically because their language long back was related to Dimasa and other languages, similar languages, it seems. I hope that answer is clear and not too controversial, because these questions can be, yes. So folk songs do not have a title. They can be categorized as work song, village song, but no particular title for each song. Yes, I think that's very true in many communities. And, well, can you name them yourselves or use the first sentence of the song? So, for example, this particular style of song that I have been researching amongst the Tangsa, which we call the Vihu song. Now, Vihu is pronounced differently in different Tangsa subtribes, Vaihau or Virhui or something, but it is the same song. So we simply call it Vihu song. And I have more than 200 recordings of Vihu songs, and they are all different in their words. And for the moment, we have been calling them Vihu song because that's what people call them. We say the Vihu song, which, for example, Ranlim sang on this particular day. But I think that the type of thing you are talking about, work song, village song, you could name them in language, and you could say this particular one beginning with these words. If we think, for example, I mean, many of you will be Christians and you will go to church and sing hymns. And we name the hymns after the first line. "O come all ye faithful" comes to mind, which some of you will know we sing at Christmas time. We name them after the first line. They don't have a title themselves. The tune has a name, often, but the song itself is named after the first line. And I think that's an analogous situation to the one that Kailadbu is talking about. You could name the song. You could say, yes, you could name it after the first line, or just say this is a work song, and we have 25 different work songs recorded. And I want to report that in 2008, I recorded, together with my colleague Jürgen Schöpf, some of you may have met Jürgen many years ago, we recorded a song that was sung together with it's a kind of traditional buffalo sacrifice song, and a buffalo was indeed being very nicely killed for preparation for a Christmas feast at a village near Toledo. We recorded it in 2008. About 3 weeks ago, I sent the recording to the member of the community I've been working with there, Kitung Hakun, and asked him to translate it, and he did. And last Saturday, I sat with him discussing on Facebook Messenger the translation of this song. It was it was a very interesting process to do the word-by-word glossing of this song over Facebook. One of those examples of the kind of thing that is only possible now that we could never do before, doing this work together. Now, the next question is one which is tricky for me. There is a tradition in Northeast that speakers of different languages tend to come together under some ethnic labels. And you have multiple levels of ethnic labels. I talked before about the point that Rob Burling made about the Lushai becoming Mizo, and I think there are probably Mizo people in the room, and the Mikir becoming Karbi. So you have that kind of thing. You also have this ethnic togetherness. So, for example, the various small Thai communities, you have the Mantai speaking group in Assam state that brings together small Thai communities. So we have that, but then, and I realize that two different questions have come up because there's one also from Nazima in YouTube Live, which is about the Thai Lai in Manipur. Now, I've come to know about this when I was last year in February. I went to visit my dear friend Ononto Singpo at Pohokatia village just south of Titabor. And some people came to visit me there from one of the Thai societies who brought some books about the Thai Lai community in Manipur. Now, there's also a connection between them, it seems, and two Tibeto-Burman languages that are no longer spoken, the Andro and the...
Sekmai.
Yes, Sekmai. Thank you. Yes, just temporarily forgot the name, which are recorded in one of the 19th century sources and are related to the Kadu and other Sak languages of the other side of the border in Burma. Now, luckily, we had a PhD student, David Sangdong, who is a speaker of Rawang, which is a language of northern Kachin state, but he did his PhD about the Kadu language. It's an excellent PhD, which I'd heartily recommend. But he also, in the process, looked into the remaining information about the Andro and Sakmai. Now, they are Tibeto-Burman languages. Now, how the connection with Thai comes in is something I'm not sure about, but according to some books which I have been given, there are Thai language words in use in that community. I think it's something that needs further research, but it's really difficult to answer about smaller communities without doing the satisfactory research that needs to be done. And that group, the Thai Lai, are of course including themselves now under Thai. So just recently I put up a post on Facebook, and some of you are my Facebook friends, but I'm not sure how many. And can I just say, I'm running out of space to admit more Facebook friends. So if you want to be a Facebook friend of mine, send me a message and say, I am such and such. We listened to a lecture of yours, and then I will certainly admit you. But I can't go on admitting Facebook friends because I'll run to the end of my group. And since I don't know how many of you have changed your Facebook names over the last several years, maybe several times, I can't go through and remove people because I don't know whether I'm removing someone that has an old name or a new name. So Facebook's a bit complicated, but we have a limit of how many friends we can have, which is 5,000, and I'm up in the 4,800, so I can't just let anyone in anymore. Anyway, saying that, I put up a post about a particular technical question, which is whether you can split a syllable in Thai languages at the end of a manuscript line. So if you've got a word like gong, which is written with a go symbol, the o vowel, which goes underneath, and then the nga symbol afterwards, can you split it so that you have the ga and the o on one line and the nga on the next line? And you can in traditional Ahom manuscripts. But someone responded from the Thai Lai community talking about what they do, and they would only respond that if they regard themselves as being part of Thai. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't. But I don't know enough about that group to really know what that situation is. I do, however, know something about Thai languages, so I could identify if their language is Thai, and I can say with complete certainty that the Andhra and Sakmai are not Thai. But I think surely I have spoken for too long, have I not? And the next speaker must be needing to speak now.
Thank you very much, Professor More, for that very enlightening and very elaborate speech talk. I'm sure all of us have learned something or the other, and I'm sure there are many more questions, but due to lack of time, we will have to end the discussion here. Thank you everyone who participated in the discussion, and since he has shared his email, you can write to him. I'm sure he will be very happy to answer the questions. Thank you very much, sir, once again.
Thank you. And it's very nice to see everybody here. I am going to mute myself and also turn off my video because it is now very much late for dinner time here. But I am going to listen to the next talk while I'm taking my dinner, if you don't mind.
Oh, yes, sir. Bon appetit, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Let us move on to our next speaker. The next talk is, the topic is languages and mother tongue in India, and the speaker is our Professor Avadesh Kumar Mishra. Let me take the pleasure of introducing him. I will not be able to give a detailed introduction, but let me try and give a brief introduction of Sir Mishra. I'm sure some of us in the group already know him, but for others who have not known him, Professor Mishra is currently working as a professor of linguistics in the Department of Linguistics, English and Language, University Shillong campus. He mastered and did his PhD degrees from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, in the Department of Linguistics. Prior to joining IFLU, he worked in different capacities in different universities and institutes. He worked as a faculty in, I'm sorry, the connection is gone. Monali.
Yeah, I can hear you, Mary.
Okay. He worked as a faculty at the American Institute of Indian Languages for NRC. He also worked in our university, in our department, and he also worked in the Northeastern Hill University in the Department of Linguistics, and he also worked in Northeast Regional Institute of Education, NCERT Shillong. And just before he joined IFLU, he was the director of Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore. He has a wide range of publications. He has published 32 books and monographs in different fields of linguistics and language studies. He has also edited 9 books and has wide publication in reputed journals and books in India and internationally. He has worked in different capacities, and he has done a lot of projects, and He is a master of all. And today we really look forward to listening to him. And he's going to talk on languages and mother tongues in India. And I hand over the time to sir. Over to you, sir.
Let me unmute myself. Namaskar to all of you. Thank you, Mary, for the introduction. And I have been listening to Professor More, and he has kind of laid down the foundation of what I am going to say. Though briefly he mentioned certain things, like it's not easy to talk about language, mother tongue, and dialects in India, especially the languages and mother tongues of the Northeast India. And as you know, that we have about 66 languages and mother tongues which are officially recorded as existing in the census of India, and they are located in the Northeast, most of them, and only say 17 say Dravidian languages and 14 Austroasiatic languages, something like that, or 21 Indo-Aryan languages. So let me begin by saying what I'll be doing is that it's kind of introduce you to the linguistic situation that we have. I'm not going to talk about a particular language or a particular language family. Rather, what kind of situation we have, the socio-political and the political and the linguistic situation that we all have. As I remember, Robbins Burling used to say that there are three different types of definitions, situations, especially in Northeast India, where no, you find deviation from what we generally think about language, mother tongue, and dialect that doesn't work in the Northeast. So that's why we need to understand what actually are given to us by the census reports and the ethnologue report, and also now endangered languages, which are included in the Atlas of UNESCO. Now, census records languages, and they go to people and they ask them what is the mother tongue of. Let me mute my video because network is very bad here. Okay. So you find that census records mother tongues first, whatever people say that they speak. And as we have the experience, we have seen it in 1961, then 1991, 2001, and even prior to that in 1951 and 1901, that various definitions were given for language, mother tongue, and dialect. So the practice earlier in 1901 and 1951 was that they recorded whatever people said, and that way in 1901 we had languages and then dialects grouped under particular languages, and in 1951 we had a situation where they used both the terms simultaneously. So the 767 languages that are mentioned, we also find they would say language oblique dialect. So they did not differentiate. And but they did mention that mother tongue is the language that is spoken by the mother of the child and the language that the child acquires from her mother and other caregivers present in the vicinity. So that distinction was gone. Then in 1961, we had a situation where they listed all the mother tongues, whether they were spoken by one person or say 1 lakh of person. They said that they are all mother tongues. And there the linguists will agree. I have seen Professor Rajesh Sachdeva sitting there, and even Ganesh Vaskaran, who worked in the census of India for quite a long time. So they would agree that all languages begin as mother tongues because they are spoken at home. And it's only through the socialization, when the socio-political things come, and then some mother tongues assume the status of language, and some remain as mother tongue. This is what we have been doing after 1971, that some mother tongues which are classified by the linguists as belonging to some languages, and they will group those mother tongues in a particular language. For example, we have Hindi, and right now there are 57 mother tongues, and Hindi is also a mother tongue under Hindi language. So Hindi is a language, and it has like related varieties they call, or mother tongues, 57 of them, and one of them, Hindi, becomes language because it is used in mass media, education, administration, judiciary at some levels, and so on. Similarly, in Bangla, you will find that Bengali is the language, and under Bengali, you'll find that Rajbangshi, Chakma, Hajong, and Bengali, they are listed as mother tongues. And then one of these mother tongues have become language. So in a way, indirectly, you can say that they have left the language thing to the society. And we all know, we all agree that language is a socio-political construct. For example, I'll cite you quickly one example. Look at the Mao language in Manipur, which for centuries it did exist. At least we know about it from the 18th century for sure. And then there were sub-tribes within Mao, like Paumai was included there. And once the Paumai assumed the status of ST in 2003, then they kind of started asserting their right as a different tribe. And this is what we mean in India in most of the tribal communities, that one tribe should have at least one language. So the moment Paumai becomes a scheduled tribe in 2003, then it also becomes a language, although census records it as one of the mother tongues of Mao. So Mao is the language, and it has two mother tongues included under it, Mao and Paula. So Paula is the language spoken by the people who belong to that sub-tribe of Mao. So what I'm saying is this example, and then look at another example. Maithili used to be there within Hindi as a mother tongue until 2003. Then when the parliament makes amendment in the constitution and makes it a language that goes to 8th schedule of the constitution, then from mother tongue it became a language. So what I am saying is that language remains a socio-political construct, and mother tongue is the reality, whatever varieties it may have, because we know that we have social varieties of the same language or mother tongue. We have class varieties and the caste varieties, geographical varieties, and so on. So that way, so I personally feel that the census, although they have different, say, agenda, maybe I can say, I am not sure. They may have some political agenda. I'm not sure about that. But the recordings are fairly all right. They are truthful to the fact that whatever people say, mention as their mother tongue, they will record it. And of course, some mistakes did happen when the linguists, some linguists, not all, or like say 5 to 7, they will sit together and then they'll put some mother tongues under a language, and some mother tongues will go as a separate language, and so on. So that is one situation. And I should also tell you that in 1961, which becomes the basis of our understanding of the number of languages and mother tongues in India, because that was the last time that they recorded all the mother tongues that were given by the people who spoke it. And you'll find that at least there are 200 mother tongues in 1961, which was spoken by only one person. And so, it's possible that we have lost that speaker who spoke only. There was only one speaker of a particular mother tongue. Then there were about more than say 300 mother tongues which were spoken by people ranging from 1 to 10. So 2 persons, 3 persons, so more than 300 were like that. And then we also had about 103 mother tongues which were foreign. So the numbers were very high in 1652, in 1961. And then they stopped recording or publishing the data on how many mother tongues actually are. And they stick to the fact that they would list only those mother tongues and languages which are spoken by more than 10,000 persons, and they will not publish the data for the mother tongues and languages which are spoken by fewer than 10,000 persons. So we do not know for sure. So that way in 2011 and 2001 and 2011, we have earlier we had 234 mother tongues and languages in 2001. And then now we have 279 languages and mother tongues spoken by more than 10,000 persons. And the remaining ones are treated as mother tongues, but the list is not published. Although it's not so difficult to get access to that data, as I, through some, say, when I was working at CIL, I got hold of the list of 2001 mother tongues, 1635. The numbers I would not reveal, but of course the names are there. So there also we find that in 2001 as well, we had most of the mother tongues retained, and same formula worked: 10,000 and above, and 10,000 and less than that. So that category was there. Now, if you look at the number of languages in 1951 census, we had 767, including those spoken by more than 1 lakh persons, some 45 or so, and the rest spoken by fewer than 1 lakh persons in India. Then suddenly we have 1652 mother tongues in 1961. So that means that we actually gained about 600, 630 languages and mother tongues in 1961. Within a span of just 10 years, 1951, we have 767, and then we go to 1652. So that doesn't seem to be right. So what could be the reason that languages are not born like that, or they do not die like that overnight, or just in the matter of 1 year or 5 years or 10 years? So the reason, what I feel, is that you would notice that in 1961, people even gave, see, and this is the reality actually, others give names to our languages and mother tongue. The speakers, very rarely they come up with a name for their language. They'll have identity, social identity, and which will not match with the exact number of language or exact linguistic code. That situation we do have. So people gave names like their caste, their profession, even the regions, and those are the languages and mother tongues which were spoken by one person, two persons, or at the max 10 persons. So about 500 you can say deduct from the total 1652. So then we are left with about say only 1100 or so, and that is what is prevailing in all the censuses 1961 onward. So what I'm saying is, actually we have not lost many languages, only some mother tongues which were spoken by 1 or 2 persons, and which were not really linguistic codes in the real sense. So, and also some mother tongues which were actually varieties, and they must have merged with the standard language. Like we have Adi, and then we have varieties like Bokar, Bori, Pangi, Pasi, Tangam, Minyong, Milang, and so on. So it's possible that some of them, okay, just a minute, yeah. So it's most likely that some of them may have merged with that. And I'll give you a quickly sample of that, that in India, we have a situation where the linguistics codes don't match with the actual language. So when census people go to them, mostly they say that they identify themselves with a social identity, a group, social group or community, and they mention their languages with that name only. But when, if you look at, see, in the census, you'll find that most of these smaller mother tongues and languages are actually, someone has to admit these people, that it keeps coming on my screen. Okay, so it doesn't match. But if you look at the census data for the scheduled tribes, and then you'll find that the number of the ethnic population doesn't match with the linguistic code. For example, in Arunachal Pradesh, we have a mother tongue called Apatani, and ethnic population is 20,834. And but the mother tongues of these people, they Adi 57, Hindi 127, Nishi 20,571 out of 20,834, Tangsa 10, and others only 33. If you look at another mother tongue in Arunachal Pradesh, we have Bangni. Ethnic population is 34,909, and Nishi is the mother tongue of Bangni speakers, 34,543. So more than 99%. And the rest speak 25 Adi, 6 Assamese, 5 Bengali, 123 Hindi, 12 Nepali, and others 166. Others means that the mother tongues which are spoken by fewer than 10,000 persons. So it could be something like it can be Sajulang or Puroik, or we do not know for sure. Another mother tongue, we have Bokar in the census, and ethnic population is 3,899. And Adi, the standard Adi is spoken by 3,885. Hindi 4, Monpa 2, Nishi 1, and others 5. And this is true for other parts of India as well. So I'll give a quick example. Let's say just move beyond northeast, like in Gujarat, Maharashtra, we have Kunbi. Kunbi is mother tongue in 2001 census also. It's present in 2011 also. It is present. We have ethnic population 60,646, and Khandeshi is spoken by them. Khandeshi speakers are 41,269, Gujarati 18,398, Hindi 13, Konkani 14, Marathi 812, Vili 137, and others only 1. So that gives an idea that actually the linguistic code is not Kunbi, because when they say that they speak Kunbi, so they give their social identity as language markers. But if you look at the exact mother tongue that they use, where they are located, then we find this discrepancy, that social identity doesn't match with the linguistic codes that they use. Then I'll give you quickly 1 or 2 examples. Lodha is another mother tongue, which is they're spoken in Odisha and West Bengal mostly. Now they have about say 1,17,000 speakers on paper. But if you look at the scheduled tribe data for the Lodha community, then you'll find that 68,305 speak Bengali, and then 32,400 around that Hindi, Odia about 7,000, Santali about 1,000, Bhumis 47, Ho 4, Khadiya about 8,000, Kurukh 428, Munda about 100, Mundari 7. And the Lodha is not even mentioned for this group. Savara 283 plus, others about 200, about 1,400. If you look at this is important for us to. Now I come back to Northeast. We have one mother tongue which is considered endangered, and that is Monsang or Mosang. Now the ethnic population of Monsang or Mosang in Manipur is 2,427, and they speak 4 persons Assamese, Manipuri 47, Nepali 7, Anal 30, Ao 2,295, Maring 9, and others only 19. We have another language which is Mru, 197 ethnic population, and others only 1, and the rest speak Assamese, Bengali, Bodo, Hindi, Nepali, and Santali. You look at Ralte, which is also now assuming the status of a language, because the people assert that they should be treated as a separate tribe, and recently they have been either already given or they are going to be given the status of scheduled tribe. But as per the census data, we see that the ethnic population of Ralte is actually only 17 in at all India level, and out of 17, 2 speak Mar, 2 Kabui, 4 Kheza, 7 Mizo, 1 Liangmai, and 1 Paite. There is no Ralte speaker. And linguistically also we know that Raltes are very similar to either Thado or Mizo. We can say that in grammar and lexicon in both the things. There is another community in Andhra Pradesh called Sulung, which is pejorative. Puroik should have been used, but still the census mentions that Sulung, we have ethnic population 4,519, and out of that 2 speak Assamese, 3 Hindi, 9 Adi, 845 Bhotia, 110 Nishi, 3,514 Rai, which is spoken primarily in Sikkim. and 25 Tibetan. No other mother tongue they use, the so-called ethnic population of Sulung or Puroik. So we find that the mother tongue, the linguistic codes do not match with the social identity and reality, as Professor More already mentioned, hinted at that. It's very complicated in India as a whole, and especially in Northeast. So what happens Northeast is that the linguistic definition that we go by, mutual intelligibility, or say being it used in various domains, governmental domains like mass media, education, administration, and judiciary, that doesn't work here. Here, one sub-tribe or a clan even sometimes is one language. So we cannot have that situation where we find this difference, that language and mother tongues are different. And because of that only, we have a situation where sometimes we find that people are in conflict. For example, Koibu, they didn't appear in 1951 or 1901 as a separate tribe, but now they are aspiring to become a scheduled tribe, and they do not accept that they are speaking a variety of Marin. But if you look at the linguistic data that by Professor Ningomba from his thesis and other documents, you'll find that Koivu and Maring actually they differ mostly at the lexical level, and some sounds are different. As the same thing, same situation we find in the case of so-called extinct languages, Andhro and Sekmai. Even the researches are going on Kakshing variety, Kurkul variety, Andhro and Sekmai theses are there, grammars are there, and as late as 2015, I had a linguistic survey made of the varieties of Manipuri, and I have seen the data. There also you'll see that the sentence structure is not different, that in either Andhro or Sekmai or Kakshing or Kurkul. Even the thesis, the researchers come up with the same idea, that they find that there are some lexical differences and also some phonological differences. So for example, if in Manipuri you have Li, Chatli, so it's possible that in Andhro or Sekmai you can have Chatle. So E can be replaced by A. Differences like that only. So this is what happens. But then we have another, say, organization that takes care of how many languages are there or how many dialects are there in the world and also in India, and that is our own dear ethnologue. Now, see, that also cannot be trusted, because what happens if you look at the three things together, the census of India, then ethnologue, and also the Atlas of Endangered Languages, they don't match. Like ethnologue gives us a number of languages in India. Say in 1996, we had 418 languages with various dialects, and in 2021 we have 463 languages. Again, we have the situation where many languages seem to be born, and even the number of extinct languages, we had 11 in 1996. Then in 2005 we had 13, 2009 we had 14, and now in 2021 we have 12. That also doesn't match, and they kind of do not record it properly, it seems, based on a concrete or solid data, like Andhro, Sekmai are supposed to be extinct languages, but they are very much, they are varieties of Manipuri. We do not know, like 200 years ago or 300 years ago, there was something called Chakpa or Fayeng, and what kind of structure they had, we do not know for sure. I'm not an authority to say anything about that. But given the fact, what the figures that we have here, then another language that is supposed to be extinct according to ethnologue and even from in the atlas is Tolcha. And you'll find in the same ethnologue report many contradictions. Like Tolcha is said as the pejorative name of Rongpa. Now, if Rongpa is alive and Tolcha is another name for it, then Tolcha can't be extinct. If Rongpa is alive, Tolcha is alternate name of it, then it can't be extinct. Then we ethnologue, we also find that many a times they keep changing the language and dialect based on some sporadic researches. For example, see, the Khelma is one of my favorite mother tongues, and I'm for them, that group, the social community, they should get all the benefits as a separate tribe and language in education, etc. That apart, but look at the situation. Kelma, even today, I think, yeah, in 2021, it is considered as a variety of Falam. Now, Falam's alternate name is Halam. And they also mention that the varieties, the dialects of Halam include even, say, Rangkhol is there, Sakachep is there, Rupini is there, Mulsom is there. So they are not sure. Like you'll find that the same name exists in so many places, and then they'll say that something is dialect, something is language. Another example quickly I'll give you, that of War Jaintia and Amri Karbi. Now, Amri Karbi, if you go inside, you'll find that the alternate name of it is Karbi. The War Jaintia alternate name is Khasi. Lingam, they list it as a separate language, but they give its alternate name as Khasi. And also the alternate name of War Jaintia is, say, Panar, or Panar has alternate name as Khasi. So though there are so many places where you find that this kind of discrepancies exist, and that's why they will say that now we have 463 languages, whereas the census says we have 279 languages and mother tongues spoken by more than 10,000 persons, and in all, including the foreign mother tongues, we have 1,369 languages and mother tongue. Now, and this is what has given rise to some say ideas like we have lost 220 languages in 50 years, past 50 years, and someone has discovered 780 languages, and so on. But that doesn't match with the reality. Actually, if you look at, except for some of the Thai varieties that that were spoken in Assam, we lost them because native speakers are not left in those Thai languages, Thai Kadai languages. That is true. And also in Andaman and Nicobar, some became extinct because the speakers died for that reason. Other than that, I have seen it each and every language and mother tongue being in certain posts on while I worked with the government of India, with Census of India also, Home Ministry as well as MHRD. And I know for sure that no language actually has died other than these that I have mentioned, Thai Kadai languages and some of the Andamanese languages. Actually, what has been happening is that, see, we were too quick to jump on a conclusion that everything is language in that sense, that socio-political sense, and meaning that all the, even the varieties or mother tongues, they all should occupy the same spaces. There we wrong. We made a mistake. See, dialects are the reality. Mother tongues are the reality. They languages are not. They are created. Languages are created. They are destroyed. We lose them on paper. But socially, the mother tongues and dialects remain valid. And one of them, of course, the related varieties becomes standard language. Look at, I'll give you a concrete example here. One from Northeast, that of Kokborok, and one from some other place. I'll mention it, what I mean by some other place. So look at Kokborok. Now, Kokborok, if you look at previous censuses, 91 or 1921, 1911, 31, 51, 61, you'll find in 1961, we had only 3 persons speaking Kokborok. And another name of it was Tripuri. And Riyang also was mentioned as mother tongue within Tripuri, and it had many thousand speakers in 1961. And even till today, Riyang remains, say, not till today, until 2005 or 2009, Riyang was a mother tongue, a dialect of Kokborok in ethnologue. And in census, we find that in 1961 or 2001, they are listed as separate mother tongues. And Kokborok became a language from 3 to more than 8 lakh or so. And Riyang, which that became a dialect kind of thing, a mother tongue within Kokborok. And the linguistic reality is that Nuatia, Jamatia, Riyang, they can manage very well with Kokborok. They do not mind it. And but ethnologue and Atlas, even they will list it as separate languages or endangered. Now in 2021, we also see a situation as it happened in past, like in 2005, 2009. Prior to that, Ruga was considered a dialect of Garo, but then later on it became a separate language. We have Sambalpuri that I mentioned somewhere in India. Sambalpuri, we had 17 speakers in 1961, and they were to be found in Bihar, the erstwhile Bihar. So those Odia speaking people who came from Sambalpur and they resided in Bihar, the erstwhile Bihar, so they called their mother tongue as Sambalpuri, and we had only 17 speakers of Sambalpuri at all India level. And today, after 2011 census, we have more than 26 lakh speakers of Sambalpuri. And Sambalpuri also ultimately became a separate language in ethnologue, whereas ethnologue itself used to mention Sambalpuri as different a dialect of Odia language. So this kind of situation, what do we do now with this? Just one thing that I would also like to mention here, that a false alarm was raised that we are losing so many languages. As PLSI said that 220 languages we have lost in past 50 years, and then they discovered 780 languages. I do not know which languages they discovered or which languages they killed out of 220. That is not known to any one of us. But the fact is, even if you look at the ethnologue data, the numbers of total number of languages in the world, we had about, I think, 4,869 or 63 in 1967. And then in 1996, we had 6,703 languages according to Ethnologue. And then today, in 2021 Ethnologue, we have 7,139 languages. So if we were losing languages at the rate of one language a fortnight, then that means that at least in past 25, 30 years, we should have lost 600 languages. But the reality is that between 1996 to 2021, we lost 14 languages. That means the number of languages that are not listed in the ethnologue for the entire world. And we gained 450 languages. And only between 2000 and 2021, that is 20 years, we gained 330 languages, and we did not lose even one language. Whereas we should have, according to that estimate, that we are losing one language a fortnight, we should have lost 480 languages. But the reality is that actually we gained 330 languages in 20 years. So given this kind of situation, what do we do? How do linguists work? And given the situation, India being multilingual, as you know, the rate of multilingualism is very high in India, especially for these smaller languages and even the bigger languages, which belong to most of them to Tipto-Burman family of languages, and tribal languages that belong to Austroasiatic languages family and Dravidian language family. Because they are smaller, they don't have say, they don't get their linguistic rights intact or supported in many domains. So they have to switch over to some other languages. They have to learn second, third languages, which is not their own mother tongue. So we have the national level is about 26% of bilingualism, 26.001 or so. And the national average for trilinguals is 7.110 or 100, something like that. But the level of multilingualism for these languages, which are there in 121, other than the scheduled languages and some of the non-scheduled languages, you'll find that except for 7 or 8, Assamese, Bengali, languages like that, we find where the national average is maintained for bilinguals 26% and 7% for trilinguals. But other than those 6, 7 languages, all have bilingualism and trilingualism rate as high as at least beginning from 36% going up to 86%. So that situation is also there, and that is actually what I would like to say here is that it has been propagated by some groups that multilingualism is bad. The problem is that the Indian polity, they could not make use of this resource as multilingualism was so much there and is still there, but it was not used as a resource. We thought that it's going to make languages die, which is not the reality that I already mentioned. Actually, it was to be used as a source in planning our languages and also mother tongues. Linguists don't mind, and even I agree with most of the linguists that for linguists, language, mother tongue, dialect, we don't care for that. Everything that is spoken is a language. It's for the socio-politically, no, the political regime to think of what is language and what is not. But for linguists, it doesn't matter. Everything, even one speaker speaks a particular mother tongue, that is language for us, and we should protect it, preserve it, and see that it is propagated. But then the question comes here: when we had multilingualism, then something happened in past few decades, and that was that situation like Australia or Canada, where it so happened. I have heard many international scholars and attended some conferences also, and have read many of them. And this is what came from the people who spoke these smaller languages in Canada and Australia. And they all the time they mentioned that when the English-speaking people came, then they told them that your language is bad, you are dirty people, and they disallowed them from using the varieties or even languages when they had say ethnic marriages between two communities, and when they were forced to live together, they would learn their mother tongues, others' mother tongue, and use them in their families. But when the English-speaking people came, they said, "You are bad. Your language is not suitable for these things." So they had no choice but to speak English. So we have to see that we don't bring ourselves to a situation where this thing happens, whether English or Hindi or the regional dominant language like Assamese in Assam, or say Mizo in Mizoram. The same thing is happening to Mar, Lai, and Mara, etc., where they are kind of, if there were no autonomous councils for them, for many of these communities, like for say Dimasa or Lai or Mara, then they would have certainly died, because there was a pressure from not intentional, but the society was made in such a way that these smaller communities were kind of forced to use the other dominant language of the region. And like Bengali, like in you will see, I have already given you the example of Lotha. I'm not Lotha. I'm sorry, Lodha in West Bengal. In Odisha, also same thing happened for many of the smaller dialects. They had to switch over to Odia. Not only English, all these regional dominant languages. Tamil did the same thing in Tamil Nadu. We have so many smaller mother tongues, and which are not even mutually intelligible with the Tamil. And they kind of they're indirectly forced to use Tamil language. In Kerala, we have lost almost all the mother tongues which were not really varieties of Malayalam. But now we have a situation, we'll find that 97, 98% of the people speak only Malayalam, and less than 2% people where we have some 17, 18 mother tongues, and many of them are not actually visually intelligible with Malayalam. Even they speak Malayalam. So that kind of situation has arisen. So now talking to what can we do for these mother tongue, smaller languages, because for linguists, everything is language. So that's why I use language. But so far as the government is concerned, the census is concerned, and even the ethnologue is concerned, they do maintain that distinction that something is language and something is variety and something is mother tongue. Now, another thing that comes here, the third agency that I mentioned is the Atlas of Endangered Languages. There are also a lot of discrepancies you'll find. Like they have listed, say, Tangam or Milang, Minyong, Pasi, Bori, not Pasi, maybe not there, Bori and Bokar as endangered. Now, if you look at the Tangam situation, as Lisa Lomdak in Arunachal Pradesh and her group, they found out that there were 245 or 247 ethnic population of Tangam. and they had only 16 children going to school. And if you look at the census data for the scheduled tribe, we find that out of 246 Tangam language speakers, they actually use various mother tongues, and that is Adi 149, Nishi 67, Tangsa 27, and others only 3. So treating Tangam or Bori or Bokar as a separate language and saying that these are endangered as per Atlas, and many a times we find that 2 or 3 names for the same mother tongue or language have been used. That situation also we find there in Atlas and even in Ethnologue. So that leads a kind of I would not say false identity. The identity is true. Tangam is Tangam. It's not Padam or it's not Pasi. All right. Or Tagin, Sulum, they're different. Tagin or Na, yes, Tagin is Tagin, Na is Na. No doubt about that. But when it comes to bringing these languages, see, we have to also take care that these languages survive. And one thing, as Fishman used to say all the time, even in later writings also, that language survives when it is passed on to next generation. Intergenerational transmission is more necessary. So giving the NEP situation that now we have freedom, although it was there already in previous documents also, previous policies, and but we could not implement it. C language formula was there, and the idea of C language formula was very good, but for some vested interests or the states were not prepared for it because they did not have enough money to take care of the infrastructure, the number of teachers, materials, etc. So it was kind of dumped. But with NEP 2020, now these two ideas have come to the fore now, and we all should try to see that it works in for our languages to survive. And as I already mentioned, that Professor More has taken care of that. That see, documentation is one aspect, but documentation and say archives are not going to help these mother tongues and languages, because we have a language, 2 languages actually in the world, Sanskrit and Greek, very old, or Latin I may include there. And the Sanskrit, no literature is richer than Sanskrit, or so much documentation as we have for Sanskrit, we don't have for any other language. But what happened to the status of Sanskrit? It kind of almost died. It survives as a mother tongue only spoken by about 28,000 persons in India or so, and a few hundred second and third language users of it. So we should not put these languages in that situation where just where the socio-political regime they want that language, mother tongue, dialect should be segregated and treat them differently. That we should not get involved into. Documentation is of course necessary, and also school education is one of the many things that we can do for survival of these smaller languages that we have. And no need to mention that with even the smaller languages, the kind of the worldview that we have, the culture that we have, although culture keeps changing and so do languages change, but still something that is there in our languages, especially of Northeast, that needs to be maintained. And but the only thing is that we have to work to see that these languages remain in intergenerational transmission. And on that note, I would also like to mention you that if you look at the 197 endangered languages for India in Atlas, except for 5 or 6 like Rabha, Tiva, Devri, Fom, Sema or Simi, Sumi, other languages in the entire India, you'll find that we have a consistent progress in terms of the number of speakers. So if you see that, suppose we had, I have it in front of me. Quickly, I'll go to that. Let's take Chang. So Chang, we had, say, in 1951, we had 1961, we had 11,329 speakers. And then in in 91, we have 32,478 speakers. 2001, we had 62,408 speakers. And in 2011, 66,852. Deuri, even they have progressed, 9,103, 17,901 in 91, then 27,960 in 2001, 32,376 in 2011. Gangte 4,877 in 61, then 13,695 in 1991, 14,500 in 2001, and 16,542 in 2011. So out of these 197, at least 190, whether they are varieties or dialects or mother tongues, not languages, separate languages, they have all progressed. So that means, and even I have compared it with the ethnic population also, there at the most you'll find 8 languages are really in danger in terms of number given by the atlas. All have progressed. So that means if the number has been consistent, so this language must have been transmitted intergenerationally. Next generation must have acquired it. That's why the number has been increasing. But the problem is that we are reducing the domains of the use of these languages. That is what is going to happen. And as I myself found in my research on Kurukh during PhD, and Devi had found in the case of Khadiya, and Arup Nath, Ajit Vaishya, and many have worked, and they have also kind of hinted at this situation where the numbers are increasing in terms of the speakers because the social identity and the linguistic code do not match. So that could be the reason. But actually, many of these languages are dying from inside. This is what I also found in the case of Kurukh. So at the top, you'll find that they'll have literature, they have documents, they have grammars, dictionaries, but the users, the younger generation, don't use it so much. Like they will record in census that, oh, I am using this language. So that's why we find that the numbers are intact or they're increasing. But actually, most of these languages are dying from within. Just a minute, it's not. So we have to. So the linguists have to take care of all these aspects, and also the society, the administrators, the administration, the government also has to take care that we help these languages increase the use, the domains, and the domains have to be transparent. What has happened actually in India is that like 118 languages are used in India as medium, as a subject of instruction, and about 47 languages are used at different levels as medium of instruction. We have 37 scripts which are used to write these school languages in place already. But what has happened actually, the domain has not remained transparent. The same domain is shared by many languages. Like in Assam, you will find that the school education domain is not reserved for Dimasa or Karbi or Missing. Or in Manipuri, we made Paite, Waifei, Kom, Thado as the languages of school. Or even in Nagaland, at some levels, we do use Ao, Angami. But then what we find that their domains are shared for so many languages, either English or Hindi or the dominant regional official language of the state. So that is kind of killing these languages, and the younger generation are forced to shift to other languages because they cannot do anything with their language in no domain. So if we take care of that, and this is the time that the government has initiated this thing, that three-language formula should be implemented in letter and spirit. They have kind of underlined this thing, and also mother tongues should be made medium of instruction at least up to class 5. So that is a very good sign. And but then we all have to come together, like as I have noticed being in the education sector, especially in Northeast, that these languages, people themselves are also not willing, because there is a fear, that this kind of feeling that if they stick to their mother tongue, which they already know, that they are speaking at home, and if they do everything in that language, that may make them backward in terms of so-called dominant and prosperous languages like English, Hindi, or Manipuri, Assamese, Bangla, Gujarati, Marathi, and so on. So they have this feeling. So we have to work in such a way that we kind of wean them away from this fear that no, that is not going to happen. And these two things have to go together, that use of mother tongue as medium of instruction, and to keep this functional no, load intact, the domains have to be transparent. We have to reserve certain domains for these mother tongues that should not be shared by other languages. And there comes the three language formula, that they'll do everything in their mother tongue, medium instruction up to class 5. And at the same time, they'll be learning English and some other language. It can be Hindi, it can be the state language. So by the time they go to higher classes, and the transition takes place, then they are ready to use these other languages, which is not their mother tongue. So if a Paite speaker or Waife speaker or Kom speaker has used her language in all the domains up to class 5, and then what happens? And in the meantime, they have become proficient, really proficient. That also is a problem. We teach English, we teach Hindi, but we do not make people proficient in these languages. It remains on the paper. They can't do anything on their own. They don't become autonomous users of these official languages, whether state or central official languages. So if we really take care of these other languages, which are used as second and third languages, and in the meantime, they do everything, their cognition, their proficiency, that means learning all the details of the grammar, all the words, by the time they are in class 5, and then they switch over to these state languages or the official languages, Hindi and English, then they are ready for that. But that's not happening. Everything is hodgepodge. We do not take care of anything, neither English nor Hindi, nor the state dominant languages or regional languages. And of course, we don't take care of our smaller mother tongues that are spoken there in the Northeast or any other part. And lastly, I would say that mother tongues are actually, that is the only thing that we can see as speakers. Other things like we may have similar kind of houses, we may have similar kind of clothes, we may eat similar kind of foods, and almost similar kind of shawls, dances. Now, because of globalization, we may have similar kind of instruments, musical instruments, and so on. But it is the language that makes us different, and that is actually the mark of our identity. We are what we speak, and that should be respected by all, not at the cost of only developing the major languages of the state or the official languages, those 22, or some other official languages. And we have a very good situation in India in at least 2 states. That is the beginning. It has not solved this problem, but it did help in smaller mother tongues, and even the non-respected, so-called non-respected mother tongues, some status, and they started developing actually. And the 2 states are Jharkhand and Sikkim. Sikkim, where we know that Nepali speakers are only few. Actually, the proficient Nepali speakers are not more than 5 in Sikkim. I know personally all of them, and not more than 7 or 8 proficient speakers, users of Sunuwar, that is Mukhya in Sikkim. But ethnically, they say that we are 2,000 or 5,000 persons ethnically, but actual speakers are very few. But even then, the Sikkim state took care of them, that they were made the official languages of Sikkim. So once these are going into different domains, then it is connected to economic development. And actually, whatever we do, linguists or language, or we become politicians, doctor, engineer, the ultimate goal is that we take care of each and every citizen on this earth. We live in peace and harmony. And it is also connected to our stomach. If the stomach is not filled, if we are all the time worried for about, say, longevity and livelihood, then other things take a secondary place in our lives. So that should not happen. So if the language and mother tongues, they are going into different domains, and we make real serious effort for that, then we'll give these languages chance to be used in different domains, and that will create employment opportunities, and it will be connected to economic development. And then only we can really have a situation where all the languages, whether in Northeast or in other places, they would survive. So that's all I had to say. As of now, I would like to take up for questions. Thank you. Thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. For that very elaborate and insightful talk. If there are a few questions, then we can quickly take them.
Right. So I would suggest that let them speak. They're orally present the questions, because
yes. Well, if you have if anybody has any question, you can unmute yourselves and ask the speaker directly.
Yeah, that will be better.
Actually, I am Madafro. I have not exactly as a question to ask himself, but I want to say thank you for the talk. It's very encouraging, especially to the smaller communities who doesn't have he or she own language as a medium of studies in the institution in their own state. So it is my hope that in the future, these languages also will get a bright opportunity through our collective supports. And thank you so much, sir. Your talk is it's encouraging, and I feel so happy to listen to your lecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Adafro.
Are there any more questions, comments, or anything that you want to ask to the speaker? You are open to do that. Let's take a few more questions if there are any.
We also came in between the lunch and this webinar.
Okay, can I come in, Mary?
Yeah,
yes,
sure,
yes, yes, sir. Yes, Pautan, sir, you can do that.
So sorry to miss your lecture, sir. I had my class, but anyway, my question is not directly on what you have presented because I wasn't there. But I have a question. How do we bridge the gap between three language formula and tribal languages? Because in the name of three language formula, many what you call tribal languages, so to say, or endangered languages or languages of Northeast India children of these languages are burdened with at least three languages. The state language.
Four languages.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
right. You're right. I got your point. I got your point.
Yeah.
So actually, actually, the problem lies that we could not understand the spirit of the three language formula. That was we were kind of misled. No, that some language will be kind of imposed on someone, and then also we did not plan it properly. Like implementation part was missing, and you have already mentioned that for the tribal languages, tribal language communities, what happened is that they have to learn 4 languages in reality, and there are states where we have only 2 languages. Like say Tripura was like that, and Tamil Nadu for most of the time. Still, it is having 2 languages. And then in the north, what happened? They took resort to having a Sanskrit now, or see. So what happens? Hindi and Sanskrit are so much related. They share the. So for a Hindi-speaking child, it's not very difficult to manage Sanskrit, and vice versa. Or for a Rajasthani speaker, it's not difficult to manage Hindi. Or for Bhojpuri speaker, it's not difficult to manage Hindi or Sanskrit. So for them, it was a very good and win-win situation. But for the tribal and minority communities, what happened? That they had no choice but to learn English and then Hindi and also their mother tongue, because they have to take care of that also. And then the regional dominant language of the state, because some domains were reserved for these regional languages, like Assamese in mass media, education at higher level, and administration. So a child who belongs to, say, a Dimasa community, she has to learn Dimasa also, study some Dimasa at school, then Hindi as well, English as well for various regions that we know. And in addition to that, they have to learn Assamese. So they don't get time to actually become proficient in these 2 or 3 more languages, which are not their mother tongue. It's very difficult, as you know, that languages for academic purposes or cannot be learned in the matter of 1 or 2 years. We need 5 to 7 years for that, and we do not give time for that. So what was missing is that teach English language properly. We did not teach Hindi or any second language properly, and also like English, Hindi, or Assamese, Bangla, Gujarati, Marathi. They are even today they are taught to second language learners as if these languages are their mother tongues. The teachers did not know. The teaching learning materials were developed by people who thought that the second language is same as the mother tongue. So their materials are so like removed from the reality. There's no match between the languages that they spoke, the children, and the language that they have in the textbooks. So what happened? These children, the tribal and minority community children, they had to learn the language, and at the same time, they had to learn from the textbook. So textbooks wanted something else, and they were not proficient in these languages. So they had to learn language like their mother tongue and also learn the same language from the textbooks as first language. So that did not allow them to really become proficient or autonomous. So that's why the situation is bad for English, Hindi, or any bigger languages in almost all the states. And yeah, it is burdensome, too burdensome for the and tribal languages. So that's why I suggest that what should we do is that use the speakers, no problem, and we should spend a lot of money. The state should be empowered, they should be given money, and even the central teaching learning materials for different regions and mother tongues. You cannot have the same Hindi or English you would use in Bihar and UP.
Network issue.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
On my other phone, I lost connection.
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, I'm doing both.
Okay. So this is what happens if we take care of our mother tongues in such a way that our second language teaching is also proper, and let's not have one kind of textbook for all the regions and for the speakers of all the minority languages.
Second language also well, and let's not have
Lost my connection.
one kind of all the minority and languages. Can you hear me?
Problem in connection. Some problem. Problem in network connection.
Yes, sir. Now it's fine. Now
Am I
it's
audible?
fine.
Yes,
Okay.
sir,
Yes,
you're
So that is
audible.
my suggestion. Yeah. So that is my suggestion, that let's not have one textbook or one kind of method for all the languages. Let's have it separately, because for the tribal languages and minority language speakers, they are doubly burdened. They have to learn the language of the textbook and also the spoken language, because written language is dependent on the spoken language. So that's why we have to, if we take care of that, then what will happen? They don't have, if the textbook matches with the spoken language and also the culture, because the culture that is presented through the languages, whether it's English or Hindi or some other dominant regional language, that doesn't match with the children's culture or what she has brought from her own culture. So those things are missing from our system. If we have these things in place, then certainly three-language formula can succeed. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. If there are no more questions, let us end the discussion here. Thank you very much, sir, for that very insightful, encouraging, and elaborate talk. And I thank all the participants once again. Before we move on to the word of thanks, I request all the participants, please switch on your videos. Let us take one group photo. I request to all the participants to show your beautiful faces. Let us take one group photo for the record. Pranjit, please take a few photographs of all of us. Nazima, please take some photos. I hope everybody is in. Please switch on your cameras, all of you, all the participants kindly. Where is Pautang, sir? He is not visible.
I am not in a proper shape to be appearing in.
We want to see your face.
No.
We all know you. We all know you. No problem.
Please show your face, Pautang.
Please show your face. I request all the participants kindly switch on your cameras.
Okay, I will. It's all right.
Yeah. See?
All right, I hope some photos are
Smart
taken.
pen na pang yun.
So thanks.
No mother tongue here. Okay. Pranjit, have you taken some photos?
Yes, ma'am. I have taken so many.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. The next item is thanks from Dr. Monali Longmai Lai. May I now request Dr. Monali to propose the word of thanks while everybody is showing their faces.
Okay, let me keep it in gallery view so that I can see everyone. Thank you, Dr. Mary Kim Haokip, for a wonderful way of moderating this session today, being the first day of the webinar series, which is the International Webinar on Indian Languages. First of all, I would like to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dilip Chandranath, for inaugurating the session and for encouraging us to proceed with the webinar and also document the languages, which was a very wonderful suggestion by Sir. Next, I'd like to thank our head of the department, Professor Ganesh Bhaskaran, for encouraging us and giving us support as much as he can from the department and for his encouragement throughout. I also would like to thank our speakers today, Dr. Stephen Murray and Professor Avadesh Kumar Mishra, for their excellent talk on two diverse topics. One is on the linguistic diversity of the Indo-Myanmar border region and documenting it for future generations by Dr. Murray, and Mishra Sir's languages and mother tongues in India. Both were very challenging topics and our speakers, sirs, have excellently presented them. I also would like to thank once again our coordinator of the coordinator and moderator of the session, Dr. Mary, for having run the session smoothly. I'd also like to thank our organizing committee, Professor Dev Sinha, for preparing the concept note and going to the VC, getting the acceptance note and communicating with the speakers for this webinar series. I totally appreciate your efforts, sir. And apart from three of us as the organizing committee, we also have research scholars helping us. Nazima Begum, who was here a few while ago in the video, She has prepared the flyer, and she has been monitoring the YouTube Live. YouTube Live is also going on, and Pranjit, who is also monitoring the activities in Zoom and taking care of registration. I also would like to thank Tiblane, Tibeto-Burman Linguistics Association of Northeast India, for their approval of the proposal of joint collaboration, and also the members of Tiblane who are present here today in the session. And also our MA students and research scholars of our department who have been actively engaged in both the talks today. I would like to thank all the participants also for their questions and suggestions and interactive discussion, and also for their support throughout. Tomorrow, the second day, the webinar will start at 7:30 p.m. I'd like to make an announcement, and the speakers will be Professor David Peterson and Professor Alexander Koop, and the moderator will be Professor Dhiren Singha. So I hope to see you all tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. It will be both be available in Zoom, and it will be streamed live in YouTube. And with this, we have come to the end of our session. And once again, a very thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Manali, for the word of thanks. And once again, I thank all the participants for actively engaging yourselves and taking out time to be part of this webinar. And a special, very, very special thanks to Professor Rajesh Sachdeva for being with us throughout both the sessions. It was very nice seeing you again after a very long time, sir. Thank you. Your presence itself was a great, great motivation for us, sir. And once again, I thank all the participants. And yes, I thank everybody who have actively participated and remained till the end. Thank you once again. And the session is closed for today. And see you all tomorrow at 7:30 p.m.